One of my favorite parts about Elden Ring is its almost infinite replay value, and most of this value stems from the fact that there are so many different ways to build your character. After having played the game many times, I want to give my opinion on my top 5 favorite weapons for every kind of build: strength, dexterity, intelligence, faith, and arcane. Quick disclaimer, this list is my opinion only, and if you disagree, that is okay. My opinion is not more valuable than yours, and I am not claiming that it is, so please do not leave angry comments on my video. Thank you. Now let's get into number 1, strength. The number 5 strength weapon is the Grafted Blade Greatsword. You can get this weapon by killing the Leonine Misbegotten behind Castle Morn at the beginning of the game. Since this area is accessible to you before you even beat Margit, it is very easy to get this weapon almost immediately. It does incredible damage, but requires 40 strength and 14 dexterity to wield. It also cannot be buffed with Ashes of War, or spells, or items. This is why it only takes the number 5 spot on my list, because there's no way to increase its damage, and the Ash of War that comes on it is not that good. Number 4 is the Golem's Halberd. The Golem's Halberd can be dropped from any of the golems that use the halberd, and requires 36 strength and 14 dexterity to use. It has very good damage, although a little bit less than the Grafted Blade Greatsword, although it attacks faster. However, the main thing that makes this weapon stand out is the fact that it can be given Ashes of War and buffed with items and spells, allowing you to put many different types of damage on it. This is why I prefer it to the Grafted Blade Greatsword, and it is much more versatile and can be used in builds that use intelligence or faith, because it can get holy damage, magic damage, blood damage, black flame damage, and etc. due to incantations. Number 3 is the Ruins Greatsword. Many strength users love this weapon, as it is the only weapon in the game that has an S scale with strength by default. However, I found while using it that although it does good damage, it takes so long to wind up that you'll probably be knocked out of the animation before finishing it, when fighting faster bosses like Malekith. However, the damage is incredibly strong and it can stagger most enemies and some bosses, allowing you to combo them into oblivion with its extremely powerful ability. You can get this weapon by killing the duo fight with the Misbegotten Warrior and the Crucible Knight in the Redmane Castle Plaza, either before the festival starts or by killing Radahn and talking to Jaren the Witch Hunter to return the castle to the pre-festival state. This weapon requires 50 strength and 16 intelligence to use, so you probably won't be able to use it until later in the game when you are a higher level. Number 2 is the Greatsword, a super strong weapon with a long reach and great damage. This weapon is so versatile that almost any character can use it, as it can get many different Ashes of War and be buffed with spells and items. It can be found in Dragonbarrow and Caelid, northwest of the Caelem Ruins Site of Grace, inside the chest in the back of the carriage guarded by the giant dogs. This weapon is one of the most popular in the game, and for good reason. A quick tip for this weapon: if you want to use its reach to the maximum amount, quickly press crouch before doing a light attack, and it will do this thrusting attack out in front of you rather than its normal sideways swings. And the number 1 best strength weapon, in my opinion, is the Giant Crusher, the biggest and most powerful raw strength weapon in the game. It can be found in a chest in the back of a hearse directly to the south of the Outer Wall Phantom Tree, Site of Grace, requiring 60 strength to wield. It can use Ashes of War, allowing you to change its damage how you like, and it has a unique charged attack where you do a front flip forward to strike the enemy. The damage on this weapon is so insane, especially when combined with Ashes of War like Royal Knight's Resolve, which buff your damage, that someone has beaten the game with this weapon while one-shotting every single boss phase.
Drink, pop this, blue, switch, this, switch this to this, throw, cleanse, in.
It's honestly crazy how much damage this weapon does, and it can stagger so many enemies, which is why it takes the number 1 spot on my list. And that's it for the big, strong, smashy weapons. So let's move on to some more agile weaponry with dexterity. The number 5 dexterity weapon is the Hand of Melania. This weapon has a long reach and a strong ability that deals a flurry of damage and builds up blood loss extremely quickly. It requires 16 strength and 48 dexterity to use. This weapon does have a few downsides. The ability takes a while to wind up, and you can be hit out of it pretty easily. You can also obtain this weapon by defeating Melania, who is considered the hardest boss in the game, so you probably won't go there to get it until the end of the main quest. Therefore, in order to do a full playthrough with it, you would probably need to go into New Game Plus. Number 4 is the Zamor Curved Sword. This sword requires 16 strength and 18 dex to use, and it is dropped from the ancient hero of Zamor at the giant conquering hero's grave. And I can see why he was able to conquer that giant. This sword is just great. It has great physical damage and builds up frostbite, as well as a powerful ability that spews frost all around you. It can't be buffed with spells or items, but it really doesn't even need it. The only downside of this weapon is the fact that its attack animations are a little weird and have a short range compared to other curved greatswords. Number 3 is the Godskin Peeler, dropped from the Godskin Apostle at the top of the Windmill Village in the Altus Plateau. This weapon requires 17 strength and 22 dexterity. It has so much going for it: fast attacks, good physical damage, and its ability that deals a lot of fire damage, as well as giving enemies the Black Flame effect, which drains their HP for a short time after the attack. Plus, despite having a great ability built in, it can still be changed with Ashes of War, and the weapon can be buffed with spells like Black Flame Blade, Blood Flame Blade, etc., allowing it to suit many playstyles. Plus, this weapon has a unique jumping attack that hits twice, so if you go into New Game Plus to get a second one, you can hit 4 times per jumping attack extremely quickly, allowing you to build up frost and bleed way too fast to the point of being overpowered. The number 2 weapon is the Nagakiba. This katana can be dropped by killing Yura, the Bloody Finger Hunter, or by completing his questline. You can get this at the very start of the game by going to the Murkwater River in Limgrave, helping him defeat Neregus, the Bloody Finger, and then just killing him afterwards. This weapon requires 18 strength and 22 dexterity to use. It has fast attacks, builds up blood loss, and can be given Ashes of War and buffed with spells and items. This weapon really shines due to its incredibly long reach, however. I mean, just look at the size of this thing. It's longer than the character is tall. I feel like Sephiroth while using it, not just because of its reach, but because of its power. Number 1 is the Bloodhounds Fang. Requiring 18 strength and 17 dexterity to wield, this weapon can be obtained extremely early in the game. It is dropped from the Bloodhound Knight in the Everjail at the end of the road that goes southeast from the Gatefront Ruins at the very start of the game. This weapon can be buffed with spells and items, and has an extremely strong ability that moves forward with a powerful swing, then jumps quickly backwards, allowing you to get in and out quickly and kite around the attacks of bosses. Pressing the heavy attack button after the first swing adds an extra attack to the ability, where you jump back in and sweep upwards, dealing heavy poise damage to the enemy. And that's it for our agile, dexterity-based weaponry. But now, let's get our studying in and gain some intelligence, because we're going to talk about the top 5 intelligence weapons in the game. Number 5 is the Moonvell, which I'm sure you've heard enough about at this point if you've been involved in the community for very long. The bane of all PvP players, this weapon has a powerful ability, which can either shoot a short-range projectile or a longer-range but slower projectile forward. It also does tons of stagger damage. Being a katana, this weapon has fairly quick attacks, which allow you to get damage in during short stopping points in bosses' attacks, which is why it takes the number 5 spot on my list. Number 4 is the Wing of Astel. Astel is one of my favorite bosses in the game, at least design-wise. so it's no surprise that this weapon would be one of my favorites. What's funny is that this isn't even the weapon that you can get from his remembrance. You just find it in a random chest somewhere. But this weapon is more powerful than the one you get from the remembrance. Its ability is similar to the flail that you get from the remembrance, where you spew out starry mist in front of you, which then explodes, dealing damage to the enemy. But it's a curved sword, so it has fast attacks, and it can be dual wielded with other curved swords, allowing you to do really fast attacks. Plus, you can go into New Game Plus to get a second one if you want to dual wield 2 of them. The reason I like this weapon so much is because it really just has it all. Fast attacks, and a cool ability, and a cool design. So this is why it takes this spot on my list. Number 3 is the Fallingstar Beast Jaw. This weapon is very powerful. It has slow attacks that do tons of damage, but where it really shines is its ability, which homes in on the enemy. So long as the enemy is within range and you have a line of sight on them, it will spawn that projectile directly on top of them. Plus, it does tons of stagger damage, so a lot of bosses that move slow, you can just spam the ability until they get staggered, riposte to them, and then do it again until they're dead. Number 2 is the Death's Poker. This weapon is a great sword that deals frost damage. Its ability is incredibly strong. You hold down the ability button to charge up the end of the sword with frost. Then you can either do a light attack to send flames forward in a wide range, or press the heavy attack button to cause an explosion of frost damage. I didn't even know that you could attack to extend the ability in this clip though. This is just the raw ability without either of those 2 things that I mentioned, so it would probably be even stronger than in this clip. And number 1 is the Dark Moon Greatsword. This weapon has been in every From Software title since Kingsfield on the PlayStation 1. And for good reason. It's extremely powerful, and in this game, that still holds true. The ability charges the blade with frost, making it deal extra damage and extra frost buildup, and the heavy attacks now shoot projectiles forward. Also, I'd just like to go off script here for a second to mention that I swear Decaying Ezekiel must have Ultra Instinct or be hacking the game or something, like that one boss from like Metal Gear Solid 2 or whatever, the one that reads your controller inputs, because literally every time it was about to hit an attack on this guy, he would move out of the way at the perfect moment. It was crazy. Now that we've gotten our studies in with our intelligence weapons, let's head on down to the church and get some faith weapons ready to go. Number 5 is the Marika's Hammer, wielded by the great champion Radagon, the Elden Lord. This weapon has good physical damage and a relatively fast attack speed, but where it really shines is with its ability, as with most of these weapons which use Int, Faith, or Arcane. You fly up into the air and then rush forward, dealing a explosion of golden holy damage on landing. This weapon is a little bit jank though. I find it fun to use, but the other weapon that you can get from the Remembrance is objectively better. Since you have to fly forward during the animation a certain amount, this can result in you missing or only hitting enemies with the very edge of the hitbox if you're up close to them. I kind of wish that they made the distance you fly forward like customizable almost, where you would home in on the enemy rather than going a specific amount, as it means you kind of have to back up to use it at times. However, I still find it really fun to use, plus when fighting human-like enemies it actually launches them into the air, which just makes me laugh. So let's move on to number 4, the Halo Scythe. Dropped by the Clean Rot Knights that guard Aeonia Swamp. This weapon is a scythe weapon that has a pretty slow attack speed, but once again, it shines with its ability. This ability is like that one miracle from Dark Souls 3 that really sucks, but like imagine if it was good. Basically, it shoots a ring of light forward that homes in on enemies and deals holy damage. But you can just keep pressing the L2 button to keep spamming them pretty quickly. So that's why this weapon is so good, because you can get out damage so quickly. Once you've started the animation of the Ash of War, you can just keep pressing L2 to throw them, which allows you to do heavy holy damage to enemies. If you dual wield them, which isn't that hard because this is just an enemy drop, they're even more powerful, and they do good damage with a great jumping attack. Number 3 is the Sacred Relic Sword, the other weapon dropped from the remembrance of the Elden Beast at the end of the game. This weapon is wielded by the Elden Beast himself, a beast sent by the Greater Will to the lands between in order to enact his laws upon all who live there. This weapon allows you to shoot out a wave of gold that travels a really ridiculously far distance and spreads out as it goes, allowing you to do one of the best rune farming methods in the game with this. It also does crazy holy damage, and it does good physical damage, and has pretty fast attack speed. This is one of the best weapons in the game in my opinion, although I don't find it to be as unique as some of the other weapons, such as number 2, the Black Blade. This weapon is wielded by the Black Knife Assassins, which are one of the most annoying enemies in the game in my opinion, especially the invisible ones. But I really do like their designs, and I really like the design of this weapon. Its ability is to jump up into the air and shoot a Black Blade projectile forward, which inflicts the Black Blade effect on enemies, which lowers their maximum HP and continually drains it. This weapon simply melts bosses. It is so good. The only thing is, I wouldn't recommend using this as your main weapon, because, being a dagger, it has very, very short reach. I would recommend it being a weapon that you hold in your hotbar, and then you quickly switch the weapon to use its ability and then switch back. And the number 1 weapon is the Blasphemous Blade. This is my personal favorite weapon in the entire game. Everything about it is so cool. It is dropped from my favorite shard bearer, Reactor, who fed himself to a great serpent in the hopes of devouring the gods. And look at the design of this thing. It's just so cool. It's a golden greatsword covered in this weird red stuff. But I like the color red, so I think it looks cool. Plus, its ability is extremely powerful. You hoist the blade above your head and imbue it with the power of fire to shoot it out in a projectile that has a long range and does crazy damage to most bosses in the game. Plus, anytime its ability hits an enemy, you regain health. This is simply overpowered, as I could understand giving this property to an Ash of War that you have to be up close to use, but no, you can hit this projectile from like a million miles away. You won't even need to use most of your flasks in some bosses, as the amount of health it gives you is actually pretty, significant. Plus, anytime you kill an enemy with this, it regenerates some HP as well, which is useful for exploring, as you can regain health passively without having to waste your flasks if you're traveling a long distance without a sight of grace. Everything about this weapon is so cool, and that's why it is my favorite weapon in the entire game, as well as my favorite faith weapon. So now we're on to the last weapon type in the game, Arcane. These weapons usually deal with blood loss, which is one of the best status effects to inflict on enemies in the entire game, so it's worthwhile to pick some of these weapons up. Let's get started with number 5, the Bloody Helice. This weapon is a heavy thrusting sword that has pretty fast attacks, and it can be used while guarding with the shield, as you can poke it around the edge of the shield to attack. Plus, it has a cool Ash of War, where you rush backwards, and then, by pressing the heavy attack button, thrust forwards. You can use this to dodge the attacks of enemies, and then quickly counterattack and deal heavy damage. Plus, this weapon builds up blood loss, like I said earlier, so this is why it takes the number 5 spot on my list. Next up is Morgoth's Cursed Sword. This is one of the cooler weapons in the game, in my opinion. opinion. However, it's not as useful as some other weapons, which is why it's only at number 4. It is a curved greatsword that has relatively slow attacks, but with higher damage, and has a really cool ability where you imbue the sword with fire and then slash the air, which inflicts blood loss while also dealing fire damage. Pressing the ability button again while the first slash is happening allows you to follow up with a second slash. This ability also deals high poise damage, which is why it's really fun to use, as staggering bosses is one of my favorite things to do in the entire game. It's just so fun to watch a massive enemy brought down to their knees. Anyways, it's now time for number 3, possibly the most infamous weapon in the entire game, the Rivers of Blood. The ability on this katana builds up blood loss so quickly that some bosses will actually bleed twice with one attack of the weapon. It is every PvPer's nightmare along with the Moonvell, and just the sound of its name will make pretty much any Elden Ring PvP player cringe in fear. The reason it only takes the number 3 spot on my list is because everyone's probably heard of it enough already, and it's relatively generic compared to other weapons. It probably is the best arcane weapon, but this is my list. You make your own list if you want it to be at the top. Anyways, let's move on to number 2, the Marais Executioner Sword. This is a great sword which has a really cool and unique ability where you throw the sword forward, at which point it spins around in the air, dealing constant damage. Once the ability is over, the blade flies back to you, and you do one final powerful swing. This weapon is really unique in my opinion, and I don't see nearly enough people using it. This is why it's the number 2 spot on my list. And number 1 is Mogwin's Sacred Spear. This weapon is just so cool. I don't know why, but I just really like everything about it. Mog was one of my favorite bosses in the game, and his area and design were also super cool, which is why I was so happy to get to use his weapon. It's like a giant trident that spews blood everywhere with its ability, and then the blade becomes imbued with bloody fire, which makes it do incredible damage. It also is big and has a long reach. This is why it takes the number 1 spot on my list. And that's the end of my list. If I missed anything, please be sure to let me know down in the comments what your guys' favorite weapons or build type is. If you enjoyed the video, like the video, or don't. If you want to hear me talk more in the future, you can hit the subscribe button, and then I will feel happiness when I see the number go from 24 to 25. Yes, Mom, I am a real YouTube. Anyways, I'll see you guys in the next video. Goodbye.